Okay, here we are. It is 3 o'clock, and welcome to the meeting of the NARC Rules Committee. This meeting is being recorded. If you have a problem with that, well, don't talk, because we are recording the meeting. I note that as the call begins, Captain L is here, Dave Platt is here, Shorty is here, Tim Barrett, and Tim Sibbles. Other people may join us during the meeting. I think everybody on this call knows one another. So I'm not sure that we need to do introductions. If anybody wants to introduce themselves, that would be fine. And Dave, it sounds like you're banging on your desk, Dave Platt. Okay, continuing. The purpose of this meeting is to get caught up. This committee should have been meeting previously. It took a while to get it organized. We have a lot of work in a short period of time. So that you understand, everything that we do really needs to go to the board at its February meeting, which is in the early part of February, so it can be presented to the board of directors. Some of it may be possible for the board to approve on its own at that time. Most of what we do, what you see on your screen right now, is going to have to go to the full membership at the April board meeting. The April general membership meeting has to be voted on by the full members, and it's going to take some work to make that happen. As a history, last year, what you see in front of you was presented. It was turned down on a motion by Sue Allred and myself because it was hard to figure out what was going on with it and what we were voting on. We're not going to have that problem again, so I want to make sure that everybody on the planet has a chance to see our proposals before they're asked to vote. I want to be able to stand up, and any member of the committee stand up and say, what do you mean you didn't read them? We only sent it out X number of times. The official members of this committee, by the way, are Dave Platt, Dave Anderson, Tom Cassani, and myself as chairman. If we take big official votes, members will be voting. I don't anticipate that is going to be an issue. I would hope that the committee, that just general who's on the call votes will be acceptable to everyone. But if board members have some major problem with that, we will make changes or adjustments or whatever as we move forward. The next meeting, the general membership meeting, is April, I want to say the 12th, but it's on a Saturday in April coming up. So I would like to have all of these changes finalized. I had originally said by New Year's Eve, and I'm now thinking we can take it a week later, but it needs to be done by the end of the first week in January. So this is going to be short and intense. The plan is to meet every Sunday afternoon from 3 until 5 o'clock. And we have another Dave here who doesn't have a last name. Which Dave is that who just signed in?
This is Dave Anderson.
Hi, Dave Anderson. Okay, so we have all of the committee members except Tom Cassani's here, and we do not expect to have Tom here. Anybody want to say anything at the beginning of the meeting before we get started?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay, this is Tim Barrett, K6BIV, for the recording, since they're not seeing the screen activity. I noticed the newest bylaws, which I've got up here on another screen, don't really mention anything about the purpose of NARC in the bylaws. I mean, if you took the word NARC out of that, you could read that, and that would be a boilerplate of pretty much could be for any organization. Item 3 that is redded out is is an interesting, I'll call it, development. NARC basically went over the last couple of elections from effectively the band planner in Northern California to now not wanting to mention in any of its core documents anything at all to do with band planning. I don't think that's smart. I'm not suggesting that NARC should try to put itself in the position to be the band planner, but there should be something, I think, in the NARCC documents that shoulders some of the responsibility to participate in band planning, especially when you look at, for instance, the 440 band. I mean, NARCC essentially controls the entire band today, because the entire band, other than I think 4 frequencies, are repeaters. So what is on those channels, what is coordinated on those channels, and all that kind of stuff is 100% in the purview, because I wanted to use that word, of NARCC. In the 2 meter section, not quite 75%, but it's more than 50% of the 2 meter band is in fact repeaters per the band plan. And
Tim?
I guess I'm concerned that the board decided to remove this statement, and as this goes forward, NARCC's not involved in band planning at all, and I think that's a mistake.
Well, we as the Rules Committee, as you'll see with the comment, and by the way, you referred to bylaws. This is the Policies and Procedures Guideline.
I understand.
Okay, hold on. There's also a set of bylaws that isn't this document.
I understand.
So we're not doing bylaws today.
I understand.
Okay, well, for the benefit of everyone, there may be some changes that are needed to the bylaws, but we're not going to do those today. And folks, if you're not trying to talk, please mute yourself so that we don't hear shack noises and other things. So Tim,
if I may, David, when you get a moment.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. In response to Tim's point that he wanted to make, concern, yes. Yep. This was done. I think David probably remember it. It was back to the last couple of sessions that we had when Gary Waldick was chairman. And if you go to section number, let me get my Roman numeral thing here going, 17, one entitled Public Outreach, you will find the answer to that in subsection 3.
Which is on page 14, the next to last page of the document, which you will see on your screen right now. If you're seeing my cursor, we're talking about part number 3 here. The board may also designate official liaison persons who participate in and report the activities of other interesting initiatives, what about non-interesting ones, outside of NARCC, and to represent the official NARCC position to such groups.
Now, this is not saying that I agree 100%, because I think we all have different positions on it, but the intent at the time when this was added to it or proposed to be added to it was that it would replace what is now the Spectrum Management Committee and allow us, if we wanted to assign a representative to another umbrella band planning organization or such as that.
Yes, I understand that. But
well,
my concern remains is that, again, as this thing moves forward, if it's adopted kind of as is being presented now, there'll be nothing in any of the official documents of NARCC that says anything about coordination, and I personally believe that's a mistake.
Coordination or band
coordination
planning?
or band plan?
I'm sorry, band planning.
That's
well,
better.
the point behind it at the time, and Mr. Platt, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, we basically got the feeling from the membership that they no longer wanted NARCC to be in the lead on this, that this needed to be a cooperative venture of all modes and all groups.
That is basically correct. The interpretation that I took, having been somewhat in the thick of it, was that there had been some in NARCC that felt that NARCC was basically the one body in charge of all band planning, and that NARCC was not only the leader, but could act on its own without necessarily taking other groups or people's opinions or needs into account. And the wording that was at that time that this procedure, this proposal suggests removing, had been interpreted by some as a claim by NARCC that it was, in effect, the sole band planner for the ham bands. And
Dave, I actually do understand that, and I'm not suggesting that there should be language that in any way, shape, or form tries to designate or stipulate or state, or any other word that someone would like to throw in there, that NARCC is the band planner. The fact of the matter is when this stuff moves forward, if it moves forward as is being presented, there'll be nothing in the documents, the official documents of NARCC, that state anything about band planning. And again, I believe doing that is a mistake for NARCC.
Well, I would say two things in response to that. Number one is, as Tim correctly points out, the language about a public outreach officer was intended, it was first cut by the Rules Committee of the time, based on discussions at the board level, to set up a structure for a cooperative process, working with other groups to do things including band planning. And if you would like to, either today or over the next few weeks, suggest adding some language to that section to specifically state that one of the purposes of public outreach is to engage NARCC in a cooperative effort with other interested groups to perform band planning for those ham bands, I think that's well worth considering and possibly bringing forward as part of these PNP changes that are being.
Well, rather than striking out the only reference to band planning that's in the document, rather than striking it as we're doing here, I would recommend that we modify this to be very clear that NARCC is not the sole band planner, but that the band planning would be, there's a lot of people that believe as things are documented, is that they're documented kind of in the order of importance. I mean, as an example of that, because of purpose of amateur radio, and I think the first entry is emergency communication. There are some that believe that because it's the first one, it's the most important one. Yet I've talked to some of the authors of that document, and that's not what they believe. They just believe that these following, in no order of importance, are that. So again, we're going to take it from the third paragraph in this document, and then we're going to throw it down to item number 17 someplace and some footnote down there. It basically takes focus away from NARCC as being a participant in band planning to something that's so much of an afterthought. I believe some people are trying to have it be forgotten from a NARCC viewpoint. And again, I believe that would be a mistake for the NARCC organization.
Well, I think that this is going to have to come to the board, because I do believe that the board has set it up right now. And someone can research this back in minutes and stuff, that it is an afterthought at the moment, and everybody knows why it would be resigned as an afterthought. Whether that's a good idea or not is not something we're going to decide today. I've made a note into the document that says, this is something we should talk to the board about, and I may begin that process, but I think that this is going to stay until such a time as I think we as the committee can say, board, do you really want to do this? And in some levels, we're saying that about the whole document when we take it to them. But that's, I think that's a little bit down the road. So I've marked this to be revisited with an eye towards what is the board's pleasure. And I think that's about all we can do here. Tim, I understand exactly what you're talking about. I sort of disagree with you, but I understand what you're talking about. And I also understand where the thing on page 14, I guess it is intended to do that. And it would be within this committee's purview, I think, to change that wording to include band planning, if you would like, and I'd be happy. I think the committee would be happy to see, some suggestions in that direction. But I don't know that we can do anything to put 3 back in until the board gives us a little better direction as to what they'd like to do, and the board should do that.
Right, Dave Platt, you had mentioned that you felt that the membership was overwhelming on the thought process of band planning, and I don't think that the membership has ever really been asked if they want NARCC to be involved at all in band planning. I believe of course the votes were actually pretty close, and the only way that they were decided was because of proxy. So that basically happened as a result of 3 people.
Tim, that is your personal opinion.
Well, I could actually research that and get back to you on that.
And frankly, at this point, that is irrelevant. What happened occurred through NARCC's normal process. Now,
Okay.
So what I would suggest at this point is, if you would prefer to see other language in position number 3, rather than have it simply be struck out, I suggest that you formulate some language giving the message as you believe it should be provided to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee can forward it to the board for consideration as part of the questioning process that Dave Corsi has suggested. And put it out as, here's what you think NARCC's position on this should be. My feeling is that what the membership, and frankly what a lot of the ham community were upset with, was the perception that NARCC, and particularly the NARCC board, without a vote of the membership, could on its own initiative make a major band plan change that would affect people outside of NARCC.
I agree with you.
Please. So, if you would like to formulate language that specifically states that NARCC works in a cooperative fashion with other interested groups in efforts to formulate workable band plans for the ham bands, phrase it however you like it and forward that in. I would be fine with the committee proposing or passing that along to the board as a suggested alternative, or either leaving the existing language in place or striking it completely.
If I may here as well, the Rules Committee made no recommendations whatsoever up to this point that would take away NARCC's ability to reject any changes that it felt were not appropriate in the band plan and to continue with the existing band plan if necessary. In other words, if somebody or a group of band planners that we were participating in decided that they wanted to ban repeaters on the 2-meter band, we could reject that and walk away from it in a heartbeat, and we kept that avenue open. So there's nothing there that takes away NARCC's right to basically keep themselves from getting boxed in, if that were your concern.
Tim Civils, there is also language in the NARCC NCPA MOU that addresses this. Is there not?
No.
Well,
Basically, it says that we agree with the present band plan, and that we're going to have to both agree to change it. And if one of us is not ready to watch, let's say, for instance, a packet removed from 2 meters, then neither one of us should be accepting the changes.
So there is something vaguely related to it. Shorty
Right.
Stouffer, your group has sort of taken on band planning and has come to realize what a difficult job it is to do. Do you have any comments?
Well, I kind of don't know where Tim Barrett is coming from when he says that he thinks it's doing the NARCC organization a disservice when it's my understanding that the membership of NARCC kind of wanted to get away from that role and allow a group such as the Northern California Spectrum Working Group to have the responsibility in that area. I can say as the chairman of that group that it's a huge undertaking and that we work very hard at what we do. And I think that one of our very serious responsibilities is to the NARCC organization to include them in any of our discussions. And of course, like this meeting, our webinars are recorded, we're open, we're transparent, we don't hide anything. And I'm quite surprised that Tim is wanting to have that language included here when that doesn't seem to be the desire of the NARCC membership. And I think it should go to the membership and let them decide.
Shorty, let me tell you what I think, and I'm not going to try to develop the language on the fly, but something that would be along the lines that that NARCC is an active participant in Northern California Spectrum Working Group, let's say from a band planning point of view. In other words, that there would be language. I'm not suggesting that NARCC should try to set itself up to be the sole anything.
Or in the lead either?
Or in the lead either. All I'm saying is I believe in this document there should be verbiage that talks about NARCC's share of its responsibility as it relates to band planning. And I believe, and it should be to the, I don't want to say the higher organization, but as it relates to band planning.
Would basically a statement of intent to participate in discussions with an umbrella organization work?
Yes, it doesn't even have to name the umbrella. The point is that I don't want I don't want band planning completely removed from NARCC's formal documentation. I think that would be a mistake, and I don't believe we've pulled the membership, or that we even have an understanding of the membership, other than as it may relate to the perception that NARCC believed it was sole band planner. That the membership certainly reacted to that, but that's not meaning that they don't have an opinion that it should be involved at all.
Well, I don't think we have to get into all of the. Go ahead.
Yeah, may I just suggest an alternative language for number 3? I think it would satisfy both Tim's concerns and kind of put us in the perception of what we are thinking the membership wants, just by stating that NARCC participates in band planning, period. NARCC represents its members' interests while working on regional band plans within the NARCC territory, or however you want to word that, period. I think that would cover everything.
Dave, if you would email that to me, I will make sure that it goes out. And then we need to make a decision. Should that be item number 3, or should that be added to part of that item 17.3, which may be a good spot to do it? I
believe it should be item 3.
Well, but a lot of things could be up in this.
It could also be added as maybe another sentence in number 1 as a mission statement.
That could be true too. So again, I think, is it generally the opinion of the committee, and if you disagree, speak up, that we should do something that says NARCC plays a role in regional band planning?
I see, just looking at the NCPA NARCC MOU, that it's all about band planning, committing both organizations to do band planning together.
Yeah, on those frequencies that affect one or the other. Yeah, if they want to take away repeaters, we'll tell them no, and if we want to take away packet, they'll tell us no.
Actually, there was a section in there that did address band planning outside of the sub-bands.
That was what I was asking about earlier, Tim.
Yeah. But it basically commits us to both have to agree to it before we adopt it.
So we may, if we wanted to get involved in band planning outside of the existing frequencies that NARCC coordinates, that may bump up against the MOU in a good way or a bad way. I don't know. But that's something we'd have to take into account at the time.
I honestly don't think that it would be a violation to include it in our mission statement at all.
And I think
Yeah.
that may be the
And-
place to put it.
Yeah, and as long as it's along the lines of what you, Dave Corsi, suggested a moment ago, that it's a statement that NARC plays a role. As long as it's, in effect, explicit that NARC is one party to it, but is not in sole charge or first among equals, but is representing its members' interests in a larger process, I would not object to that. And I agree we shouldn't try to identify who the specific group is that's managing the umbrella, but list it as a general thing, because who identifies who is the umbrella organization, if there is one at all, is likely to change over time. I would like to go back and just comment on something that Shorty said about the members' reaction to the Northern California Spectrum Working Group. I don't believe that the members have expressed or even been asked anything whatsoever on that particular question. Northern California Spectrum Working Group is a self-organized group. It separated off, most members came from the Spectrum Management Committee, but it separated off of its own accord, and it is self-generated, it's self-chartered. The charter came strictly from the members' own decisions, and there hasn't been any formal read from the NARC membership, as far as I'm aware, as to whether what the Spectrum Working Group is doing is good, bad, indifferent, something to be formally recognized or not. That may be one of the things that the membership should be told on, either formally or informally, at some point in the future. So I'm open to having the proposal for a change to the BNPs have the sort of statement about NARC playing a role as one of a number of organizations in doing regional band planning, and I don't particularly care whether it's item 1, 3, or 17, as long as it's clear that NARC is not arrogating to itself the lead or sole role. That's what I think sets a lot of people.
Well, I have added notes which are visible at the far right-hand side of your screen that I hope will get us moving in this direction one way or the other. We're not going to solve it today, but I think we've come up with an idea. I mean, what I hear is that we want to add something somewhere that says NARC participates in a band planning process with regional band planning process with other organizations without naming any other organizations. Is that approximately what we're saying?
I think a general statement of intent is all we really need.
Okay. So it's in the notes, and we'll do something with it headed towards the next meeting. On the mailing list, particularly the Yahoo group, we can discuss this during the week before next week and maybe figure out what we want to do. But we are now a quarter of the way through our meeting and have gotten precisely through 3 paragraphs. So if we may, I would like to move on. Tim Sibbles, is item number 3 in fact true?
Item number 3, as in the subsection there.
No, as in the first page, right below where we are. NARC is a certified member of the National Frequency Coordinating Council. Is that true?
Yes.
It is.
I didn't
We
know
are.
this.
Now,
And-
understand that you're basically, and maybe I'm injecting some opinion in here, but you're basically saying that we are an official charter, and I would add charter member, we are, of an organization that does nothing and has no purpose.
I'm just getting off the board of one of those. I will add charter.
And I'm not sure, and maybe some of you ARRO members can say something, but I understand that it's kind of questionable whether the ARRL even recognizes the NFCC anymore or not.
I will call and ask. Okay, let's continue.
They do. They have an active MOU with them. It's been signed by Kay and the new president of NFCC.
I will call and ask. NFCC doesn't answer its email as best we can, as you would know better than we do, actually, Tim.
Yes, they don't.
We provide repeater directory data. We do that. Frequency coordination services performed at no charge. I think that's very important. And I think other places may charge or may require you to be a member. I think that was the case in somebody who lost their compensation. I would like to change definition number 1 to add a salary for directors of the organization. Number 2, and stop me if you have something to say about this. Coordinator is appointed by the board to coordinate frequency use. Then we describe what a coordination is. And read along. And I think that is probably all accurate. Harmful interference, is that the correct definition, Tim Civils, of harmful interference?
That has been for years the definition that NARCC has held, basically literally for quite a while. It is not exactly the definition that FCC uses.
Yes, the FCC's definition is not based on a technical measure like this. It's based on a behavioral measure that harmful interference prevents or substantially degrades a communication.
Right, something that would be very difficult to define.
Okay.
As a working definition for FM or similar modes, this is probably a reasonable definition.
Okay, and I'm going to add a note that this is an FM mode definition. Because it would not be the same definition for digital, would it?
Yes.
Yeah, because if it captures a signal, it's not going to decode.
Would you know?
Yes.
Okay, good. Tim, you're the expert. I will remove that.
How about adding a note that this definition is differing from the Part 97 definition of harmful interference?
I don't know that Part 97 actually defines in Part 97. Does it define harmful interference?
Yes, there is a definition for it. However, as Dave pointed out, it has portions of it that are open to interpretation. I may think that it degrades my radio experience, and Joe over there might not. Now, who's right?
Laura Smith, she's always right. Okay.
Laura ain't going to get involved in one of them.
Why would we want a definition of harmful interference to be anything different than what the FCC would consider harmful interference?
Very simply, because this one is basically carved in stone. If it stops you from using the system, if it captures the system away, then it's interferent or harmful interference. If it doesn't, and doesn't prevent you from using that repeater, then it's not. The commission, like a lot of Part 97, has a lot of gray areas in it, the same as their definition does. You would be basically opening yourself up to a gray area that would basically end up with an endless debate and nothing ever being done.
It's called nuisance interference.
Yeah, we would have lots of fun board meetings trying to determine what harmful interference is. And that really doesn't have anything to do with the 100 dBm stuff that we've been talking about for coordination. Tim, is that Tim Civils, is that correct?
That's correct. Two separate subjects for obviously separate reasons.
I just want to make sure. Nuisance interference, this is the more important, I think, definition of the two, and that this is the one that we run into the most often, and this is the one where the board may be called upon to make a judgment call, and where we need the membership to understand in your relationship with your co-channel users what we're expecting. But again, we do not set a specific definition here. And is this where the 100 dBm thing might go? Or some similar figure?
No. 100 dBm, negative 100 dBm discussion. We'll call it that. What will end up probably end up being something more like -120, -122, somewhere in that neighborhood, is basically primary coverage area. In other words, where does your coverage area begin and end?
At the last board meeting, somebody looked up, I think it was Scott, in minutes of old meetings that -100 was mentioned as a standard that we were using in old minutes.
Actually, that was voted on by the board, but it's probably not going to fly at this point over the long term. As a matter of fact, I think the board's been pretty clear about asking. Matter of fact, I think it's in the minutes of a couple of the meetings saying that we need to finish that up and decide on where that line is going to be. The technical committee has absolutely, it should show in some of their, I was listening to the recording of that last meeting myself here a while back, and it was brought up then that that figure needs to be refined and brought into line. -100 was something that was adapted from the commercial radio community. And when you're reliably operating with PL tone in and out, you don't hear a whole lot of stuff, So -100 would probably work in the commercial community where it's questionable, or at least a lot of people think it's questionable whether it would work in ham radio.
There are a number of things that are policies and procedures that we use that are not in this document, and I want to talk about those later, but we may want to raise this as an issue, that if we're going to enforce it at whatever number, it needs to be in the P&Ps. It does not need to be something that is just imagined, or you find out later it was voted on years ago or whatever. That everything we do needs to be in the P&Ps.
Yeah, they need to be documented if they are things that are going to be part of a regular technical test or use by the coordinators. My own hunch is that there's probably not going to be a single number specified here. There are going to be, it would work better to have two. One of which says, if your signal level is stronger than -100 dBm, that is considered definitely part of your primary service area, and there is a basic presumption that that level of signal strength is enough to cause harmful interference. And so dropping another repeater in that area would be considered a no-no. If you're below some lower number like -120, the presumption would be exactly the opposite, that that is not strong enough to cause harmful interference, and the answer would be yes. I have a feeling that there is going to continue to be a gray area in between those two numbers where you actually have to look at the situation on a case by case.
My problem with that issue at this point, Dave, and to a certain degree I can understand where you're coming from, but understand from a practical standpoint, having had to deal with it, as long as you don't have a hard line on your coverage ends here at this level, you're going to have people demanding coverage from the Oregon border down to Bakersfield, and I still get them almost on a weekly basis because of what happened with the Palo Alto repeater on Black Mountain, basically saying if you stick up an Earth Moon Earth array and you can hear that repeater, then that's the coverage area. There are a lot of people that are now demanding that coverage area of the entirety of NARCC, and without that hard line, we're going to have a hard time keeping that genie in the bottle.
Well, I think I heard Dave say that there would be a hard line that says you can't claim any coverage beyond a certain number, that it's presumed that you have coverage out to -100, and it's presumed that you have no coverage, and we won't accept a claim below negative, off the top of my head, 120. Dave Platt, is that what you were saying?
That is correct.
Okay, because I understood you to say that there will be a gray area and there ain't no hard line.
No, the gray area would be. Go ahead.
Yeah, that there is a line of presumption stronger than this, absolutely harmful interference, no way you can go. Below another number, like -120, NARCC assumes 100%. There is no harmful interference, and we won't accept coverage complaints for that level of predicted signal.
Yeah, and the other thing that I tried to explain back when this came up the last time, I think at a board meeting, there is also the absolute standard that if there is harmful interference, like it keeps you from using that repeater, those figures go out the window. Once you have harmful interference that can be documented, that is the overruling factor.
And given the FCC wording, I agree.
Yeah, and that, again, that's something that I think we need to talk with the board and with the technical committee about. But what I have heard today is a lot more direct and actionable than anything I have heard previously in the discussion. And it may be that we should, as a committee, go to the board and say, please pick a couple of numbers, because we're already doing this, and pick some numbers that the coordination committee can live with, and then we'll change them if it turns out it's not accurate. But it seems like in our P&Ps, we ought to handle this issue, but it's something we need to get some input on.
That's true, and we have been waiting for almost 2 years for the technical committee to get off the dime and figure out what the implications of the various numbers are in terms of their actual correlation between harmful interference and a given signal.
Well, if they don't present numbers, watch my lips, folks, we're going to present numbers. May not be the best numbers, but we're going to get this off the dime and at least have the board vote or not vote on a change to the P&Ps that would address that, because it needs to happen, and we don't need it, sitting out there forever.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that you should consider having a very firm heart-to-heart talk with Mr. Aspinwall on the issue of is he going to finally give some numbers and some technical backing, or is that still awaiting them having a meeting after a year and a half?
I'm not going to comment on heart-to-heart talks with anybody, but I will talk to Mr. Dousman, who will actually return my phone calls. How's that?
That will work.
Okay, now let me mention this now for everybody's benefit, because again, not within the changes that we have to take to the board because we're required to, but at our last meeting was the board meeting, was dominated by stuff that the coordinators do that are not in the policies and procedures. You might think that pay pause mitigation is in the P&Ps. No, but you'd be wrong. You might think that who has, and this wasn't at the board meeting, but it came up afterwards, that who can contest a repeater coordination would be in the P&Ps. It's sort of implied, but you'd be wrong. And what is the third one? Pay pause mitigation, P&P changes, and I had one more written down. It's the standing pay pause and the 100 dBm thing. All stuff that is being used in some form or fashion. Now, as we move to item number 7, I am wondering if we should add, because I'm going to keep bringing it up until we do, something that says who has standing and who NARCC can communicate with. Tim Civils, tell me what is the policy that is used today?
The unwritten policy that has been in effect since before 2000, going back into the late mid-90s, has been that the primary representative, as listed in the organization's record, is the only one you can do official business with.
And what that means is that users who want to complain about something complain to the repeater owner, and the repeater owner is responsible for recognizing the interests of their users. What happened, and I'm a party to this, so I'm a little biased, is that I'm seeking a coordination that a user of the repeater has decided I shouldn't have, and you're going to love this one, despite the fact that the owner of the other repeater says it's just fine and refuses to contest the repeater. At least one member of the board wanted to take this seriously. And it's out of what the practice has been And whatever it is we want the practice to be ought to be in the P&Ps.
Yeah. The other thing is too, to add to what you were just saying, when it doesn't involve a privately owned repeater, when it's a club owned repeater, we would of course be assuming that the primary rep would be somebody that that club has appointed to represent them, so therefore the complaints should be channeled through that representative to us.
There are, to be fair, some people who believe that NARCC needs to be more representative than it is today. And we do allow, and Mr. Platt, I believe, is one of them, people who do not own repeaters to be members of NARCC, not a voting member, but still a member, and those people can make up to half the board of directors. And I believe Mr. Platt and Mr. Lawback and maybe someone else are associate members who the membership has elected to the board.
They would also be allowed to hold up to 2 positions on the technical committee as well.
As appointees, as board members.
Yes.
So I have to, my own opinion is fundamentally I'm opposed to that, but the members that we have, you know, I don't want Dave Platt kicked off the board. I mean, you know, there are good people on the board who are associate members, and I'm more likely to give them a repeater than I would be to do something to get rid of them, while at the same time, I don't believe that non-repeater owners should have a vote in telling repeater owners what to do. End of diatribe.
Well, I think that's the balance that we've struck right now.
Okay, Dave Platt, I think I heard with Tim.
Yes, I put it this way. The FCC has specifically stated that repeater coordination groups are expected by them to respect the interests and the needs of all of the hams. Now, the FCC does not.
Well, I'd love to know
specify,
what section that comes from.
You will find it in the cross letter and a number of others, communications from the FCC.
Those were opinions.
No, those were statements by FCC writing in response to questions or requests for action by various parties. They were official responses by the FCC. Now, the FCC does not say anything about how repeater coordination groups are to be chartered or managed internally. It's perfectly, what NARCC does today in its rules is perfectly fine. It would be perfectly okay with the FCC if NARCC said only repeater owners get a membership at all, and that there's no such thing as associate member. I will point out that there are other repeater coordination groups, and I believe the Texas VHF Society is one of these, that allow voting membership by any licensed amateur radio operator. And those groups seem to do a comparable job in terms of successful coordination of repeaters to what NARCC does. I am not proposing that NARCC changes its rules. What I will say is that NARCC, in the opinion of quite a few people that I've talked to over the 12 years I've been a ham, that NARCC is an organization that has a problem with delusions of grandeur and prima donnaism, in the sense that the repeater owners have at times behaved as though they felt they were in charge of the world. And I believe that it is in NARCC's best interest to structure itself in a way that guarantees that it is always keeping an eye on the interests of amateur radio as a whole and the needs of all amateur radio operators. Because the FCC is very clear. The thing that gives a repeater coordination organization its authority is the fact that the hams as a whole in the area agree that it's the group that should be doing the coordination, and they follow its recommendation. The FCC does not appoint NARC. It never has. The authority that NARC has comes from the fact that the hams in this area have not kicked it out.
Yeah, but again, the only people who can kick it out are people who have repeaters who would vote with their feet.
Wrong. Mr. Corsi, that is incorrect. That is explicitly incorrect.
Explain to me practically how it happens otherwise.
How it happens otherwise is that the amateur radio operators as a whole in the area choose a different coordination body.
How would they do that?
In practice,
But your audio's going away.
sorry, in practice, it would be difficult, but that is what the FCC said
No,
that the regulations are.
I absolutely disagree because it absolutely says those people who have
No.
auxiliary or repeater stations.
No,
It
Tim.
does not say those that have a licensed class that can have one. It says those that have them.
No.
Now, also,
Tim,
I disagree on the respect. Excuse me.
Sorry.
I disagree with the fact that we need to be an umbrella organization. We are a special interest group. We have never proposed to be any different. Now, I welcome the associate members because they bring in the perspective of somebody from outside the forest that can still see the trees, but limited to the respect that the users don't take over the repeaters from the people that put the money and the effort into keeping them alive.
We are not going to decide this today. I will say that ARRL attorney Chris Imlay tends to agree with Dave Platt, and Dave Henderson, who actually does the work as staff, tends to agree with Tim Civils. So, we're not going to solve that today, but this does bring up something. Should there be a statement in the bylaws or in the P&Ps that says repeater operators are expected to be public trustees? That you're expected to run as part of your coordination, you are expected to run your repeater in the best interest of amateur radio. I don't know the exact wording here, okay? And that could be used to get rid of closed repeaters.
We already have one that says that you're expected to follow best amateur practices.
Yeah, but that's not really what I'm talking about.
Isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. I'm thinking you could say it more
That
clearly.
isn't limited to technical. Best amateur practices also have to do with the operation of it.
I won't disagree, but I will at some point raise this issue again.
Yeah.
But let's get moving, because I think we do need. I think everybody here is right. I mean, I agree with Dave Platt that we need to represent what the community wants. I think it's impossible to determine exactly what the community wants. I disagree with Tim in the sense that associate members who are going to join this group aren't going to be normal hams. They're going to be people who somehow care about repeaters or have been sent by some other organization or some other interest or something. It's not just going to be your general ham radio member. So
It still represents a different perspective.
it does, in fact. Let us continue. Service territory doesn't change.
May I just, David?
Go ahead.
Can I just put one quotation on the record here. Quoting from Part 97. Definition 22, frequency coordination. An entity recognized in a local or regional area by amateur radio operators whose stations are eligible to be auxiliary or repeater stations that recommends, transmit, receive channels and associated operating and technical parameters for such stations in order to avoid or minimize potential interference. It does not say that they are operating as repeaters. It says that their stations are eligible to operate as repeaters or auxiliaries.
Well, and that's what they disagree about, and a little bit of this is like, is a fetus a person? Is the potential to have one of these stations, is that what causes you to be included? Or the fact that you have a station and your station is in again, we're not going to solve that today, and there are two views of that, and both sides think they're right. Let us go down to the technical committee description, which is section 3. Everybody take a look.
Just question, David, for clarification purposes. I don't recall, is this one of the sections that was rejected?
The whole thing was rejected. All of the changes you see were rejected.
Okay.
I don't hear any big problem with this, so we will move on at the moment. There's the technical committee, and we'll ask the technical committee what they think. Repeater technical standards. This is fun. Awaiting tech committee input, which has not been received to date. Are there things here, Tim, representing the coordinators broadly? Are there things here that need to be added, subtracted, changed, or whatever?
Well, this is one of the places where the minus 100 thing could fit into as well, but we're going to stay away from that. The blanket 4 kilohertz deviation peaks, of course, with the new technology that we have today is kind of a little bit outdated. It really isn't appropriate for everything. We have to, I think we're going to have to define it down more along the line of based on the mode and type of station that you're operating, it could very well be different. In the last meeting of the technical board, I submitted a chart of some technical standards that also specified and suggested certain deviation limits for certain modes and certain types of radios. Yeah, there's probably some things, and they're escaping me right now beyond that. But that's the one that is obvious and glaring, because we have a number of complaints on a regular, ongoing basis that people are just tearing each other up on the segments of the band that are 15 kilohertz splits, because the repeater operator's operating at 5+ kilohertz of deviation and just splattering something terrible.
Yeah, I have some of that problem. I thought the number was 3.8 anyway.
That was a recommendation. And it's not something that even if we were enforcing it, that we could enforce. It's basically something that we, as coordinators, have recommended to people to, if they would voluntarily do that, that it would prevent the problem.
Tim Barrett, this will include digital as well as analog systems. How are you with that?
4 kcs of deviation?
Yes.
We don't need it. We're much less than that. So
okay. I noticed
not exceed peaks. You know, another thing that's here is item 2, 1-to-1. Now, part of this is because of Beal, but I mean but it certainly does affect coordination, where you have what formerly were high-level repeaters. Let's say that were in the footprint of what was impacted by Beal. So what they've done is they've dropped their transmitter. They put dummy loads on and all kinds of stuff. They got a 20 milliwatts of RF power, but the receiver is still on the community antenna with a preamp on top of the tower. So the coordination is protecting the receiver disproportionate to item 2, 1-to-1. I don't know how you solve that, but if PAVE pause is not going to go away, or the impact of PAVE pause is not going away, then the 1-to-1 thing has to be 1-to-1 based on the least common denominator, which would be the transmit power.
I noticed that Director Aspinwall, chairman of the technical committee, is here. Hello, Jim. Hello, Jim. No, Jim's. Let me unmute Jim. He wasn't muted, but he was at his end. Jim Aspinwall, hello.
Hello. It takes a little bit to find all the controls, so take.
Oh, welcome. Okay, do you have, what's going on in your technical committee, and are you going to provide input to us? Are you not going to provide input to us by, the middle of January?
That is yet to be decided if we continue to have the discussion along these lines with Tim and Eric and get some of this. I think the technical standards as part of policies and procedures needs to be an addendum item because it's not something you can cover in a couple of paragraphs here. And the idea of 1-to-1 is a transmit receive issue. 4 kilohertz is irrelevant when you're digital, either wide or otherwise, because you have different skirts. So there's a lot of things that go into this that the way of doing this by analog thinking without a lot of explanation of what the spectrum looks like when you're transmitting on FM versus digital, etc. is that's going to need a little more coverage and illustration.
Do we need a disclaimer on these standards that says these are analog driven standards and digital standards are either being developed or, I'm just, because if you guys don't come up with something that we can get past, we're still going to have this language basically in the P&Ps. So I would like to figure out what do we do to make this language applicable to analog repeater owners going forward until whatever's going to happen happens.
I understand. And I'm not in a position to describe it at this point. It's my goal to try and get some language around this in the next month or so once we get some of the input back. But
understand, David, that we're not all in agreement on that, and that agreement is yet to be reached.
I would think that it seems like most of the areas of non-agreement that I've heard of on the technical committee really don't relate to analog repeaters.
They relate to everything because I believe that it's a standard that is going to be attempted to be applied to everything.
Well, it depends on what standard. I mean, that's why all of these have got to be qualified relative to mode. Mm-hmm. Because, as Tim says, the 4 kilohertz is, whatever we do with 4 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz, whatever, it's got nothing to do with pave pause. It's absolute emissions got nothing to do with that. But,
it's already inapplicable to the 900 meg band because that's on 12.5 kilohertz splits. So 4 kilohertz would be excessive.
Jim, it would be very helpful to this committee and I think good for the group as a whole, and may also take a little bit of the fire under the technical committee and give you guys more time to do your work, which is pretty complex, if we could come up with a way that here are the analog repeater standards for analog FM repeaters that are most of what we have today. And then when you're ready with really great digital standards, we adopt those. But in the meantime, those of us who are only running analog repeaters, it would be nice if these standards really did what we want them to do for analog repeaters.
I understand. And don't make a mistake that I don't think that when Tim is saying we don't agree, it's that we have not resolved and had the discussion about handling at 20 kilohertz spacing versus 15 versus 12.5 versus 6 1/4. It's just we've got to get our head together and map that all out because it's going to vary for very valid technical, sound technical reasons. It's going to be different.
What it basically means essentially is that we have a lot more discussion to do on that point. Just because we haven't reached an agreement doesn't mean we won't.
Well, again, for everyone, I would like to, for whatever we can do that relates strictly to analog repeaters, please conjure something up. I don't care about digital repeaters at the moment. All I want is good standards for the members, who's almost everyone, who runs an analog repeater, so that what's in the P&Ps is in fact current and accurate. That's all I ask.
Acknowledge. Now, the issue becomes that bolting it into this set of policies and procedures, there may have to be a separate agenda item for technical acceptance by the membership, or we're going to end up in the same boat we had last time we tried to go run these P&Ps through, is we threw out the baby, the bathwater, the bathtub, the water fountain, and considered all the land we dumped it on toxic and walked away from the whole thing. And we can't let this set of policies and procedures be, it'd be great if everybody would just accept, read them and accept them and understand them en masse and vote the whole thing. But while we've got a lot of great technical minds that can prove beyond a doubt that we have a set of right numbers or appropriate numbers, we also have 300 and some odd other members who have got a technical, input. And I don't want to trash the whole your P&P procedures making progress where it needs to be made for these couple of sections.
Well, I anticipate that we will offer these to the board and to the membership as a group of individual proposals that can be voted up or voted down independently of the others.
Doing it by line item or item number is progress and probably appropriate, so we don't stall off another year's worth of work.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Having been involved in doing that, it ain't going to happen again, Jim.
Yeah. So, admittedly, we have some work to do, and it's a matter of getting heads together and going, well, is it 3.75 or is it 3.8? Can we live with this? I mean, nobody wants to. My proposals of numbers are based on aggregate principles, from other data collection and commercial experience, and that's where everybody else comes from. Is CBS has got one set of standards, ABC's got another, the SEC's got another. Let's agree on what is where we can come to a common ground on what's do we really care if it's 0.05 off? It depends on
again, if we can just get what's here updated so that it is current, because I know there's lots more stuff you want to do, particularly with digital systems, and I get that. But if we could just make sure that what's here is useful and valid for analog systems, I would be very happy, and I think it would be a good thing for the P&Ps to do that. Another issue that we've talked about today, and Dave Platt sort of summed this up most succinctly, is this whole 100 dB, negative 100 dB, what is prime coverage? And his suggestion, and I think Tim is okay with this as well, Tim Civils, is to conjure up a number that says if you overlap at 100, that's guaranteed to be harmful interference. We won't coordinate that. Then it also says if you overlap, say, at 120, that we're not going to hear an interference complaint if you're overlapping in the 120 signal area. And then where we are concerned with from a coordination decision is between 100 and 120. Is that anything that the tech committee could get its mind wrapped around with soon? Because already, go ahead.
Well, that's been a nature of discussion of what those acceptable. It's not just the number, but yeah, what are the rules when we can you come to the front door with minus 100? Can you come to the front door with minus 120 and complain? And a lot of that is also going back to some rules of what constitutes co-channel cooperation, because sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't, and people get surprised. So it's not only a number, but it's what we do with that number. If somebody's proposing a minus 100 interference level, they better have a letter from the co-channel that says, yeah, I can live with that. You come to me with a, minus 120 or minus 130, and that, that's in the noise level. Forget it. Just have a nice day.
Well, if there is a way to define where we think the noise level is, that below this frequency, it's got to be below this noise level, it's got to be nuisance interference, and above this level, it's got to be harmful interference. Two numbers. If you could provide us with those two numbers, I think life, and again, related only to analog. I am only for today talking about analog. If we could have that number, life would be easier for our coordinators.
Understood. And it's the coordinators that need to weigh in, and some have and some have not. So,
well, we can take care of that. In any case, those are areas that we are interested in and would like to see included in this update of the P&Ps, some of which have, go ahead, Tim Civils.
Jim did bring up one point that we should consider before you scroll away from that one section.
Okay.
And in going through the discussions that we have had in the technical committee, throwing it into a paragraph or even a section, let's say expand it to the area that this repeater technical standards area is, it's probably not going to work. We're probably going to have to make a change to that to where it says that NARCC is going to take the chart or the standards in Addendum A or Appendix B, and these are going to be the accepted minimum standards. Writing it in the format that we have right now probably will not work. I'll have to agree with Jim on that.
Yeah, I think we need to pull this out because other organizations, the policies and procedures are actions taken and rules and boundaries of those actions, and then there's separate technical standards, either quite formalized or even looser than this. And for something that's going to be dynamic and you want to bolt on, if we look at other ways to execute decisions, the bylaws certainly is a full membership buy-in situation. Policies and procedures, not necessarily for every organization are policies and procedures an entire membership situation. Technical standards, some organizations say, we're going to trust our technical committee, the board will adopt with comment or otherwise, and there's all kinds of ways to contribute to that and get consensus, but some functional matters, like whether we issue a reimbursement check for postage, is not a membership level decision. I'm not saying that, the technical standards are that trivial, but we have to look at how this organization does business, and only being able to do business once a year, is a huge frustration. And so if we think of another way to exercise those decisions and get adoption, that's fine. Right now, that's not built in. There's nothing built in that says everything must be brought to the membership. And part of that is that we're doing so is to build trust and get some input and participation. It was mostly done as a reactionary problem-solving measure. Well, we're opening this up a little bit more. It is legally possible to adopt a different set of policies and procedures without membership vote, given that we have a committee forum to bring those points together. The same thing could eventually apply to technical en masse or singly. So this, if there's a policy and procedure situation, you're just like the coordination procedure. What are the 10 easy steps to coordination? May not outline itself well to being in the policies and procedures.
Until such a time, Jim, and I agree with you that we need to make changes. I get this. Only, doing this once a year and the board being afraid to make P&P changes, which I think it is. I agree with everything you've said in that regard. At the meantime, this April, we're going to be voting. I don't think we're going to get to where you would want to be or where I would want us to be in April. So I would like to do whatever we can with what we have to make it useful and effective for the coordinators to get their job done.
No,
And
David, I have an idea, David.
yeah, Cap,
Which
go ahead.
I'd like to suggest, which is if you struck all of Section 4 and Section 5 and just started listing these things under Section 6, under technical best practices, of which there are plenty, including some listed in what has been your Sections 4 and 5 in the old P&Ps, then that might get past this business about the problem being we're only talking about analog, or we're not yet decided about digital, and so on.
I think that takes us beyond what we have been told we have to do by the membership last year, which is to say make some changes to what was presented and fix it, do fixes with it and make it current, I think. But I think doing a wholesale rebuild,
that's a next year project.
Yeah, there's a lot of this that is becoming a 2015 issue, and I'm sure I hope in 2015 Jim will have a whole bunch of stuff from the technical committee, and we'll be a little closer to digital adoption, and people will be thinking more about digital, and all of that will be a whole lot easier. But again, we need to have these to the board in February, and they need to be things that the board is likely to approve and that the membership is likely to approve, because this automatically goes to the membership.
All right, but the Section 4 is written only applies to analog, and it's not very good in the overall sense. So,
Dave?
Yes.
I have a question for Tim. And if we apply the standards to analog and craft something similar to what this is, between the discussions of between you and the technical committee and us, and we state that, and we state in the statement, while you're still working on the digital systems standards, that the digital systems shall not exceed the analog systems, would that not protect both the analog and the digital systems both?
I would point to you Section 4, subsection 1, midway through the paragraph. In the case of digital systems, they should be designed to remain within the channel limits with minimum spillover. I think that's that could continue to be an acceptable minimum protection until we get the appropriate changes made.
I think, if we don't have the digital stuff in there, let's wait for it to come in there. But at this point in time, from what I understand of digital, my limited use, because I only use P25 and a little D star, we're narrower than the standard FM signals, so we would very easily fall within the restrictions of an analog system.
Exactly, that's the point. You're not causing damage to anybody else that let's say on the 440 band with 25 kilohertz spacings, you fit in there quite nicely, and you fit within that description of within the channel limit. So this still protects us from something that's overly wide and overly hot, that's spilling basically digital data over too wide an area. You guys easily, if your equipment's in the appropriate working order, does that. So we have a minimal protection, your system works fine. I think this probably will cover us until we get the specific requirements in place.
Jim Aspinwall, is it possible that if this said analog repeater technical standards, that you could, in the time frame we have, provide simple enough to be useful to get the job done, digital repeater standards that would be similar to this and would cover what your group feels like at the minimum that needs to be covered soon?
Well, that is indeed the goal. I can't promise that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think we can at least come up with what we have here in 4 and 5 is what I would call guidelines, and understand that this is a document called guidelines in which we squished standards into, and that's not appropriate. because we took a less restrictive document we call guidelines, and we either got to strike guidelines and say that's how we're doing business, or we have to strike standards and deal with recommended practices plus or minus any enforcement rules about that. And I think we can probably get away with best practice guidelines as recommendations that allow everybody to, and don't necessarily prohibit coordination, and then separately work on standards depending on how we can handle, the lines of quote unquote regulating coordination. That because we know that there's only one real standard for whether we should or should not accept a coordination, and that is harmful interference and complete operation outside the FCC regulations. Given that there aren't many standards in the FCC regulations, we've got to be really careful about this. I think if we take a position as a teaching learning organization, which I believe every amateur radio operator and group should be, that we can give guidelines and say, here's what works for these reasons. Those are guidelines. And this is where some of the technical documents have referred to required versus recommended, because if you stay if you can stay tightly in your 5 kilohertz allowable energy envelope there, that's great, but that's not feasible in an analog situation. So, but we have to illustrate some of that. So,
well, I wonder if we use the word guidelines, or maybe strike it, because let's think about enforcement for just a moment. There is a repeater that slops well over into one of my repeaters 15 kilohertz away. So obviously there is something going on there. If it's not fixed, should we pull the coordination of that repeater? Do we have any enforcement is really what I'm asking. If we're going to have these standards, should there be some enforcement behind it? Or is this, we're all happy and life's cool?
Well, that kind of goes to how much energy is actually showing up out there, because, and I don't want to turn this into a technical committee meeting, but at some level, every analog station, unless there's some really trick circuitry in it, is going to have signal level outside of its allowable window, its normal accepted window of where you expect energy to be, audible, useful energy. So that's why there are guard bands, so that energy level is 60, 80, 100 dB down, and not discernible. And if somebody's off frequency, this is where we do not have rules for maintaining coordination. And I don't want to bind the specifics of maintaining the coordination and tie the technical standards together in the same kind of document, because we have to establish coordination is kind of a binary thing based on reference technical standards, and kind of divorce the whole process. Since we don't have much of a framework that tells people what the expectation of getting coordinated is, and we don't have much of a technical framework, even if we were to point to it, that's there's a lot of construction that there's some framework and construction that needs to be built around both pieces of that.
Well, but this can be pretty simple. I mean, you slop over my repeater so that it interferes with my repeater, and you're 40 miles away from me, and my repeater's 20 miles away from me, then you're doing something wrong.
Define slop over. Quantify it.
I could do that, but it's beyond what we're doing for the call.
Does it meet the harmful interference requirement?
It makes it hard to talk on the repeater.
No, it doesn't make it hard to talk on the repeater at all. It makes it hard to hear the repeater.
Same idea. Continuing. But do we do anything so that if you are if you have a coordination and you're violating technical standards, and that's beyond what we're talking about today, do we have a way to act against those people? And I think the coordinators believe we do, but I'm not sure what it, exactly what it is.
If I may, David.
Sure.
Yes, we do. However, that has to be qualified. And it's qualified in the respect that we can act on it and send the letter out and tell them, you're way out of line here, you're interfering with your neighbors, we have a complaint here, and because of that, we want to revoke your coordination. Now, we can send that letter out, but remember, they have the right to appeal. And that appeal can go to the board, and the board can say, well, we really don't have the authority to do this, so no, we're not going to revoke it. And that's caused because of the fact that we have a very generalized statement here that really doesn't define it down. We're going to have to make that statement in order to do that. And also the membership's going to have to agree to it, because remember, the membership has the right now to reject anything that the board passes.
Comment?
Yes.
Yes. One very clear, strong standard that we can make is the FCC's levels of what they consider harmful spurs. And if a repeater is splattering outside its channel band,
Dave, Dave, maybe is your microphone cable a little funky? You're cutting in and out like you're not making connection or something.
something is continually turning the volume down on my mic. I'm not sure why.
There's an automatic gain control there somewhere, I'll bet.
Or automatic echo cancellation or something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are you on a headphone?
Yes.
Oh, well, normally that's not a problem with a headphone. If say what you finish what you want to say kind of quickly, because you cut in and cut out and it's hard to figure out what you're saying.
Okay. If somebody splatters in excess of the FCC spur level into a channel, that I would think would be a clear objective standard. And on the issue of can NARCC revoke coordination for violating technical standards, that's one of the many areas I think we need to poll them.
Yeah, poll the membership on. Okay, I think I got that. Another thing here that relates to everyone, it's another issue that came up, is should there be language that says pay pause mitigation is a condition of coordination? That is what we're doing today, but it's been pointed out it's nowhere in the rules.
It could be added as a note to number 2 regarding the one-to-one system. If there was a note there about pay pause and the one-to-one system, it might include that.
In this case, I don't think it's prudent to build in external influences to a document of this significance. Pay pause could go away next year. It could never go away, and some of that's still to be determined. So building in language about an external influence is probably going to be difficult to come back to this, because if pay pause goes away, then we've got this language in there that's a moot point that we have to wait a year for the membership.
Hold on, if it's a moot point, then it doesn't matter because there will be no mitigation because it's gone. I mean, you can say coordinators must consider pay pause mitigation as a condition of coordination. And I'm going to push to have something like that in there so that we don't have another joyous meeting like the board meeting we just had.
I'm a little confused here. How is it we have to wait a year for a membership meeting?
We normally do.
If it's part of this document, it doesn't have to go to the membership meeting. How is it we have to wait for that?
Well, that is true, because again, this is not a membership-bound document. We are allowing it to be at this point, but it does not have to be if we can use other mechanisms to gain consensus and practice. And to the pay pause issue specifically, I would not bind it to pay pause, because there may be another technology or some other influence that comes into play. We already have language in Part 97 that covers that, but I think we should say, we need some latitude in the language that says if there are, other mitigating external influences that cause us to, make other technical adjustments, address it accordingly. But to bolt pave pause specifically into this is, I don't think it's necessary, and I think it's limiting.
You enjoyed that last board meeting because it's not in our standards and we enforce it. You enjoyed that meeting?
I'm not going. I'm trying to ignore that, David. But I don't think we need to build any more regulatory specifics into policies and procedures than is necessary. It's that may be a transient external regulatory influence versus Part 97. So it gives us more flexibility if we externalize that to coordination policies rather than the policies of the organization.
Well, the policies, coordination policies are in this document. Go ahead.
Can we just mention what you want within pay pause and mention pay pause in an ambiguous or anonymous fashion? Because as stated, pay pause may be here for 40 years. It may be here for 4 months. And maybe in 3 years, we may have something different that we have that's having a similar effect as pay pause is having, maybe on 440, maybe on 1.2. But we need to, if we have something in there that's more ambiguous but addresses the issues that we deal with pay pause, that should be sufficient right there. And it doesn't.
That's what I'm saying. If we put it in terms, couch it in terms of regulatory influence, like the FCC, and not to a specific technology or DoD project, we get a little more latitude out of it.
Except that with the latitude comes a lack of precision, and the problem we have is a lack of precision.
I'd like to point out that if I could just, that the way this is written here now in Section 4, Repeater Technical Standards, it says all systems coordinated will be required to adhere to technical standards, and they're listed here, including such as number 2, the systems should be configured to a one-to-one system, which the pave pause stuff is not now. So it's the problem, as Jim's pointing out, of putting the technical standards in a document like this.
And we don't have a technical standard for pave pause. We are at the whim of people with secret numbers, be it our own or ARRL or external influences. So we can't write a standard for pave pause. We can only write a process that says you can pass numbers by Ed Hare for reality check, but until we are privy to what makes up that technical standard, it's an external influence. You can't write rules around an external influence that are subjective.
I absolutely disagree, and we will continue, and you can have your committee and discuss it, and I'll have mine. Because I just disagree. I mean, the meeting that we have where the board members were not willing to vote on a motion that says we won't consider pave pause, but nobody can says, well, I can't find it in the rules, so why do we do that? Well, we need to either find it in the rules so that we have a reason to do it, or we need to stop doing it. It's kind of binary. I mean, again, I think it was a legitimate complaint. It's not in the rules. Why won't you give me my coordination? Because you're not pay pause compliant. Well, where does the rules say that? Well, it doesn't say that in the rules. Okay, so I'm going to move that we get rid of that, and the board unanimously votes it down.
David?
That's why we are pending conversation from the ARRL to refine that whole situation, because we didn't want to strike down something and then have to go back and undo it again. So
have they not responded yet?
No. The response I got was that Ed Hare and Dan Henderson had conflicting business and personal schedules, and we should expect something after the first of the year.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Yes.
In addition, just one short point too, in that if we're going to continue to keep the standards here able to be changed by the board of directors and not be tied down to this every year type of thing. I don't think it's too much if we put something direct in there and very pointed. I don't think it's a real problem every quarter having the ability to revoke it and remove it. I think it would be real quick and easy. I don't think that's a drag to the system at all.
I would agree with that. Go ahead, Aspinwall.
Just one procedural question. I'm sorry I came in late, but I've been part of this process since we started this committee, one way or the other. And through the technical issues and all these other decisions, how familiar is everybody who's participating here? How in depth have you looked at the 35 other coordination bodies for their managing documentation, their technical standards? Because I think there's every possibility we're trying to overdo something for a hobby that doesn't need to be overdone, and in other cases we may be just walking around blindly going, well, there's already things that other groups have done for just as long, and this is where we hope NFCC helps us. But I just wonder if anybody's gone and got a binder or a folder on their computer of the stuff other groups do as ways to resolve some of these language and where bits and pieces belong stuff.
I think the answer is only you do, and in any case, it's not going to happen in the period of time that we have to get this out.
Actually, that's not true, David. I have been looking at the other organizations for years. But then it's partially my job as coordinator to do so.
I don't think we're going to do an exhaustive search of best practices and change the P&Ps to reflect some best practices consensus. On the issue of pay pause, only one other coordinator, or whoever is the coordinator up in Cape Cod, they're the only one who have a pay pause problem. So we're not going to find a lot of pay pause references in other coordination documents.
And they don't have the same problem as we do because basically they're on the coast instead of inland. So they're not blowing over the heads of repeaters that are having to be put off the air. It's a whole different world. So even though they're pay pause, it's not in the same world.
Well, we are, and the point is made, we should look at other documents, and that may be something that we start doing in April. Dave Platt, do you have any comments?
I think let's see, is my audio coming through okay now?
Yes, it is. Yes, you're here.
Great, I turned off the auto tracking. I think we need to, where possible, get some general explicit technical standards in that maybe just, thou shalt not splatter outside my channel in a way that exceeds the FCC standards. And if you do, under those circumstances, we will no longer recommend you operate your station that way because you are in violation of FCC Part 97. For more specifics in terms of what's considered best practices, I agree that's going to have to be an ongoing kind of thing. It's going to differ from one mode to another, with the goal always being do not radiate outside your channel in ways that your neighbors cannot tolerate. And I do think the membership is going to want to be able to have a say in the adoption of any fundamental changes in those areas. And I base that in part on comments I heard at the board meeting last year of people who voted against the P&T's change on the grounds that it would allow, that basically they were being asked to approve NARCC having technical standards that they couldn't see yet, and that the people who were coming up with the standards could spring anything on them. I really do think the membership needs the opportunity to weigh in on the question of what kind of violations of what kind of rules or best practices are considered by NARCC to be sufficient justification for withdrawing a coordination or refusing to renew it. And I'm not sure quite how we want to phrase the question for that to get an answer that's going to be usable and meaningful and won't cause massive rebellion and pain every time it gets used, but I think it's a question that needs to be asked.
That may be a survey monkey. At least we can get some feeling of, can we do that? Dave Anderson, NUO, do you have any comments?
Yeah, and this just kind of came to me just now. In looking at the document here, is there a way that we can maybe just reword everything and not use numbers on here, but say that your repeater will operate within 12.5 or less than 15 kilohertz of the frequency allocated, and keep everything else in there, and then when the technical committee comes back with the technical standards with the numbers and hard numbers and everything, then maybe we just adopt that as an addendum that does require the membership approval. The other thing is, I kind of see, maybe it says down here, this is a condition of coordination that the repeater operator will adhere to. Something like that maybe should be one of our last bullet points, and state on there that failure to adhere to these standards will put the coordination in jeopardy or revoked or whatever.
Good. Okay. We are at 19 minutes until 5 o'clock, and we are going to turn into a pumpkin at 5 o'clock and maybe a minute or two sooner. I would like to run through the remainder of the document quickly with the purpose of just picking out areas that we need to spend as much time as we spent on today. So I at least want to have run through the whole document once. So I am going, for example, do we really want to require PL on the output of everybody? Just as a thought. Then we have technical best practices. The coordination committee, what do they do? The things here are style changes, as I'm sliding through right now, where a word has been changed. We're going to ask Sue Allred to go through all of this for consistency. Again, the waiting list thing, I don't think that's a problem that it goes away. Yada yada yada. Change its standards required. This may, and Jim Aspinwall, this may be something that you want to talk to us about. If this language, the new language as 0.5, does that help? Does it hurt? You know, where would the technical committee be with this sort of language? I think this also talks about some of the other things we have discussed. Primary coverage area is not defined. That's what we get to with that down 100, down 120, down 190, down whatever. So primary coverage area does not have a definition, and maybe it should. That's sort of why I raised the issue as to what we are as to what we're trying to do. So primary coverage area defined how? Because we refer to it, and if we don't have a definition, why are we referring to it? And I think we all want a primary coverage area. We just have a hard time. And Jim Aspinwall, that's something you guys can do and get after.
That's something that he is already doing.
Yes,
we're already discussing that. So yes, that's on. I am correct, am I not, Jim? That is still on a priority list, right?
Yes, we still have board direction for that specifically.
Yeah, and I would, if you guys can come up with that, please, 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 do not make the rules committee have to come up with something that then gets bitched and moaned about. Technical, I just want to see it get in so that it's there. I mean, if are we going to say just remove the wording that says there's a prime coverage area? I don't really care. I wonder about this number 7. we say we'll only issue a coordination to stations. This gets back to some of what Dave NUO was saying. Should this say we will only reissue? I mean, do you have to be compliant with our standards to maintain your coordination? And I think this sort of implies that, but does it need to say it more directly? That is a question that we need to be looking at. Don't mail us stuff is good. Except auxiliary, that's true. All the rest of here, frequency
Question.
searches. Yes.
Dave, quick question.
Yeah.
You know, we've this just procedurally. You know, we've basically have got rid of the green sheets, and from what I understand, we want all submittals for stations to be done on the online database.
Yes.
Which I think is a wonderful idea. However, we then say earlier in this document, or possibly in the bylaws, that you don't need to be a member of NARCC to get a coordination. So how does a person get a coordination if they're not a member? How do they get access to the database? You get an org number.
You get an org number, which you do not have to be a member to get.
You are not required to be a member. However, you will have to ask for access to the database system, which you will be granted.
Okay. Has that actually happened yet?
No, there's been no refusal, so it really hadn't been an issue.
Okay. All right.
Everybody who asks gets an org number, and then the org number is necessary to request coordination, and that has nothing to do with membership.
Okay.
Dave, may I step back for a moment?
Sure.
Yeah, the question you asked earlier about the statement that coordinations will not be granted unless you comply with the technical standards, and should that apply to renewals? That's one of those big areas that the membership needs to chime in on, because what happens if NARCC chooses to change its technical standards? Those would certainly apply to new coordinations, but would all existing repeaters be required to upgrade to the new standards in order to renew, and if so, how soon?
Dave,
one of the things that we have.
Dave, would you please put, that's really good, and that makes good sense, and I hadn't immediately thought of it. Would you examine that issue for us and report next week on where you come up, where you are with that and what we might do or not do?
I will not be able to. I'm going to be out of country for a month.
Okay. Well, send me an email, and we will see that gets looked at.
Okay, this is one of the things that was in the previous P&P's discussions about, and in fact, it seemed to be something that generated some dismay of the explicit idea that once the membership agreed to new technical standards, stations would be required to comply with them within a period of something like between 1 and 2 renewal cycles in order to continue to renew. That was a straw man, and that may not be the right number, but the membership may or may not be willing to say that you have to agree to new standards or not. They may say, no, once a station is coordinated, it's grandfathered in at that level of technical standards forever, or somewhere in between. They need to be asked what they'll put up with.
Jim, Aspinwall, what is your feeling about that as you are looking at new technical standards? How should technical standards be either faded in or not? What's your thought about this?
Well, I think it depends on the standard, and take, for example, the consideration of refarming 144 to 146 is not something you can do overnight. There has to be a deliberate, plan of attack. And the same thing would happen if you were to go narrowband in UHF. It's that's probably less of a situation. But if you've got people, and I keep touting Regency HR2s, if we come up with a technical standard that an HR2 couldn't meet, we got to give some reasonable time, considering the community we live in and what we're dealing with here. So we just can't turn things off overnight. Only the FCC can come slam things shut overnight.
Well, for that matter, we have no ability to require anybody to do anything.
David, one other point to this,
Yes,
and
Tim.
we have this issue now. If it's only upon coordination but not followed up with, you must do this to maintain the coordination, then what you do is you set your deviation at about 3.5, and it sounds all pretty and it stays within the borders, and the minute you get your coordination certificate, you crank that sucker up to 5, and there isn't a thing we can do about it when they do it. We have them doing it now, because there's really nothing that says past the coordination point that we can bring anything up. Essentially what it amounts to is that by not extending it to during the entire term of the coordination, that allows them to ignore the whole thing after they got their coordination certificate and change practically anything.
Well,
Correct.
yeah. And there are a couple aspects to that because, well, first of all, I don't know why if you went to all the work to make something sound really pretty at 3.5, you think there was any benefit in doing otherwise. There's sort of an honor system here, and it goes to who we deem as authoritative on taking a measurement and saying something is non-compliant. And based on, let me step back 40 years and go, the way that we operate coordinations versus many of the other groups is you guys go fight it out, and if there's no fight, we'll issue you a coordination. We do not deliberately participate in the guidance and help with compliance to be a good station. We depend on contention or the lack thereof as our decision-making process. And
But what do we do if something changes? What do we do if something appears to have changed?
Dave?
Go ahead.
Yeah, back up on the technical standards, there was that last sentence in that last subsection of 3 that I was thinking, if you pull that out by itself and you say that, and you word it so that it's a response, as soon as you get up there.
I'm trying to find it.
Okay, it's a little more.
It seems like I passed it already. Is it right here?
There it is. Okay.
Okay. Which one are we
where it
talking
says-
about?
The last sentence in subsection 3, where it says, it is a condition of coordination that the repeater operator will adhere to the standards of good engineering practices. That's a condition of coordination. And maybe another sentence that says, failure to adhere to these standards will be subject to a revocation or suspension of your coordination.
Well,
you could add
good engineering practice for Regency HR2 is not the same as good engineering practice for a P25 radio. So
okay, then change the words of the standards of good engineering practices to the standards listed herein in Appendix XYZ, whatever we end up putting it at.
David?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I think that this is part of a broader issue. I don't think that this section is ready to be changed. I think that this is one concept that gets blended in with the enforcement mechanism, and that's something that we're not ready to deal with right now. So perhaps maybe we should note it and come back to it when we get into the enforcement section of it.
I mean, I agree. It would be really great to have the community and the culture and the lifestyle and the attitudes of the community be as cooperative and in agreement to say, bad child, you're over deviating, go away, and have people go, oh, that's fine. But the prevailing attitude is, you can't tell me what to do. You're not the boss of me. And that's been the nature of the organization. If we can get consensus that enough people feel that there are enough problems, and Tim's got a heck of a lot more exposure, and so does Steve. But just in my time of being involved with the organization, there aren't that many contentions that 300 people are going to say, bad repeater operator, take him off the air. We just don't. That's not our lifestyle and culture. So
I wish I had $1 for every time I've been told you can't tell me what to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's our culture. It's
and fundamentally, NARCC doesn't have the legal ability to tell anyone what to do. What NARCC does have the right to do is decide what it will do. And NARCC, as an organization, if its members so agree, can make the decision that coordinations are subject to people complying with the coordination. And that if NARCC makes a recommendation, which is what a coordination is, for operation of a repeater in a certain way, under certain technical standards or within certain limits, and the owner is clearly operating outside NARCC's recommendation, NARCC would have the authority to say, since you are not doing what we recommend, we will no longer recommend that you do it. And so when your coordination runs out, we will not renew it because you are not complying with it. Now, that does not tell the repeater owner they have to change or take it off the air. That is entirely their decision.
It's advice and consent. And
it's advice and consent.
So that's, and case in point, and why a lot of this came to the forefront is because a lot of people said, you can't tell me what to do. I found a place I don't hear any crap. I'm just going to start transmitting there. And we still have people practicing that today and expecting community consensus and adoption of what they're doing, because we refused and other people refused to let them do it our way. So in a lot of ways, this is a frustrating, never-ending, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that if people don't like what we want or what want to do their own thing, they're going to flip and go do their own doggone thing, regardless of whether they like NARCC or not, because they're doing it.
That is true, and in fact, the FCC has repeatedly said they have the privilege of doing that.
So our only ammunition is we're going to flag you uncoordinated. Now that maybe that means something to some people, and in a lot of ways there are a lot of uncoordinated systems that are operating with very, very, very good practices outside of the realm of our purview, and there are some people that feel like a coordination is a badge of honor, which in some cases it might be perceived to be as a matter of community acceptance. But if you don't give a crap about the rest of the community, then a coordination means absolutely nothing. So the only reward we hand somebody is that you got a Good Citizen of the Week award. Period. You know, my student is member of the honor roll. That's
and you get the limited get out of jail free card that comes along with a coordination. That if you're coordinated and you get a beef with an uncoordinated repeater, they get the responsibility and you're not responsible for changing. That is the only real carrot in the mix.
Okay, this is it for us. We're at 57. Coming up on next week's meeting will be who has a right to participate in coordination decisions, which is something we've talked about previously. Who can complain? Who can't complain? That issue also came up recently, all because of the same person, interestingly enough. Our next meeting will be... Yeah, will be next Saturday. Well, hold on. This is a committee meeting. It's also entertainment. This is 2 minutes until the hour. Next week we'll be here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I will send copies of the documents that we used. I have been adding some notes to the edge of the PDF, so you'll get a copy of that as well. If you have comments or anything you want to get in, that's fine. Please, if you're not part of the Yahoo group, please join the Yahoo group. If you have questions about that, send me an email, and I'll be happy to tell you how to get into the group. Is there anything that has got to be said in the minute we have remaining?
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, well, we're going to be meeting next Saturday, so we'll be good. Okay, thank you very much, and this has been a good meeting. The recording will be available at audio recording only as soon as Steve has it edited down, and we will post that and people are welcome to listen. Thank you to Mr. Aspinwall of the Technical Committee who joined us today. His input was very valuable. Thank you to each of you who attended. Please feel free to invite your friends. This is an open meeting, and we want everybody to know what we're doing.
Ho, ho,
That's-
ho.
And that's it. I have to see here how to turn off the meeting, but I'm going to do it as quick as I can. Good afternoon, everyone.
Happy holidays, all.
And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Ho, ho, ho.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.